My brother, Dr. Tim Weeks, and our clinic is here as a holistic clinic to help people get well naturally. So many people are struggling with health problems and they go to their doctor and they get put on medications, kind of pieces of tape over their check engine light, and they never learn how to get themselves well naturally. And what we're passionate about in our clinic is helping people learn how to get themselves well naturally, and that's what this meeting is about tonight. And tonight we're going to talk about aging. And aging is a fun subject, especially for us women, and especially for us professional women, because we're acutely aware of, in our society, we have to look young and we have to look beautiful, but there's some conflicting things out there. Many people don't know how to look young. Many people don't know how to keep their bodies beautiful and how to stay healthy. And so many people find themselves under all this pressure to stay beautiful and stay looking young, but they don't know how to do that. And so tonight we're going to talk about that, and we're going to look to a guy named Dr. Weston Price. So the first thing that Dr. Price found is that these people didn't eat any refined food whatsoever. And so these traditional cultures, it wasn't just any primitive culture, they had to have access to lots of good natural food, and they had to have a really good mineral-rich water source. Mm-hmm. And so as long as they had that, these principles apply. So no refined or denatured foods, which means that they don't have the nutritional content and enzymes that help you break them down. Some animal foods, they all ate some animal foods. Nutrient density, which means that the food that they ate was grown on nutrient-rich soil, so it was very dense in nutrition, and then they chose the foods that were the most nutrient-dense, like liver, for example. Some raw foods, their diets were high in beneficial bacteria and enzymes. Can anybody tell me what that means, which food I'm talking about? Fermented foods. They didn't just grind up their seeds and grains and make them into flour and eat them. They sprouted them first, which unlocked the nutrition in those seeds and grains. They had diets that were high in dietary fat, much, much higher than ours. Equal in omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. Omega-3s are the ones that are anti-inflammatory. Omega-6 are the ones that are inflammatory. To give you perspective on this, our diet now is about 16-to-1, omega-6 to omega-3. Naturally mined salts, whether they were by the sea or a mine that they could get salt from. Bone broths, and they made provisions for future generations. Pregnant women were on a special diet in these cultures. Little kids were on a special diet because they knew if they got them the right nutrition, the next generation would be healthy. Now tonight I'm going to focus on just a couple of these. And I'm going to focus really on enzymes tonight. Now, can anybody tell me what enzymes are? Anybody know?
The aid in digestion?
That's right. Enzymes are specialized protein that get reactions going. So when you eat food, your enzymes break the food down and digest it. But you also need enzymes to think, and you need enzymes to breathe, and you need enzymes to move your arm, like this. And so no cell can perform any function without enzymes. And that's what we're really going to talk about tonight. What I want to show you first are some of the people that Dr. Price found in these cultures. So this beautiful woman, Dr. Price met in the Polynesian Islands, and she's 90 years old.
Wow.
And this is at a time when people didn't live very long lives elsewhere in the world, right? She's 90 years old, and she stands up straight, and she looks very dignified, and you can tell her brain's working quite well. And this woman obviously ate the foods that Dr. Price was talking about. Now, Dr. Price noticed a very interesting phenomenon. This was in the early 19th century, so the 1920s. And what often happened in the 1920s was, come on in guys, go ahead and take a seat. Many of these primitive cultures were isolated, right? And this was a time of exploration. So people were going into primitive cultures and bringing their food in, right? And so an example of this were the Eskimos in Alaska. We started settling in Alaska, and with it we brought our food. And so Dr. Price would always call these foods the displacing foods of modern commerce. And so Dr. Price was able to photograph people before they started eating processed and refined foods, and then after a culture would start eating processed and refined foods. And often there'd be neighboring cultures, neighboring tribes or groups of people. One were eating traditional foods, the other was eating processed foods. So here is a picture of some of the Polynesian islanders that had began eating white flour, white sugar, processed food, what Dr. Price called the displacing foods of modern commerce. Much younger people, but they look quite different, don't they? So, and this is a quote by Dr. Price. This is one of my favorite quotes. "Sugar is caustic, plain and simple, especially the white refined versions, which demolish health with staggering ease." And so the people that started eating the refined foods started aging quite quickly, right? Their teeth started rotting and falling out. Their tissues became less strong. They started getting degenerative diseases. And Dr. Price noted this. And this is one of the reasons we always say no nutritionist is worth their salt if they haven't read Dr. Price's book, Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. So I want to bring it to modern day now. And what I have here is I have two different people's blood. And this was examined under a dark field microscope. And both of them are 30-year-old females. The woman's blood on your left side eats a diet that is close to the Weston A. Price diet that's close to the traditional cultures. The woman on your right side eats a standard American diet, a SAD diet. And the standard American diet, what did the food pyramid tell us to eat? Mostly grains. And what our grains are what? They're processed, right? What does processing mean?
Not in its natural state.
Not in its exactly. So when they process foods, oftentimes they strip some of the components from the food, they heat it, and they kill the enzymes that help you digest the food. And sometimes they'll even bleach the food to kind of make it all the same color, and that takes whatever other minerals away from it. And unfortunately, you can see the difference in two people's blood. The one on your left, the red blood cells are nice and plump and they bounce off each other, and they're evenly distributed. The ones on your right are shriveled. They're kind of dehydrated and they're sticking to each other. They're not kind of working quite right. And what's important to remember, to understand, is aging happens at the cellular level. All of us are just a bundle of cells. And aging happens at the cellular level. So that's kind of interesting. So the person who's on the Weston A. Price diet is eating a diet that's rich in enzymes and minerals. And I'm going to kind of explain enzymes in just a second. The person on the left is eating a diet that is not rich in any nutrition. So when I talk to groups of people and even my patients, I use two things interchangeably. I use sugar and refined carbohydrates interchangeably. And so I want to talk about sugar for a minute and what that does to our bodies and how it affects aging. And then we're going to talk about what enzymes do and how we can prevent aging with that. Now, I read this the other day and I liked it, inflammaging.
Oh, yeah.
All aging is chronic inflammation. And inflammation isn't necessarily a bad thing, right? If you cut your hand, it's going to get red and it might swell up a little bit, and that's a good thing. That's your body's kind of protective mechanism and helping it heal. When inflammation is a bad thing, it's when we have eaten something over and over again that has not only not given us the nutrition that we need, but it's forced our body to put out output to digest it and kind of deal with it. And what happens at a cellular level is we start to get inflamed, we start to get a chronic inflammation. And all degenerative diseases are associated with inflammation, all of them. And when I say degenerative disease, I mean heart disease, cancer, diabetes, things like that. The thing that causes the most chronic inflammation is sugar. And most of you guys in here have heard me say that before. And so I like to take people through what happens to your body when you eat refined carbohydrates or sugar. I'm using those interchangeably. All refined carbohydrates turn into sugar. So when we eat a refined carbohydrate, a couple things happen. And I'm going to kind of talk you through that. The first thing that happens is our blood sugar spikes really quickly. And the reason it spikes so quickly is because that refined carbohydrate has been stripped of its minerals that would have kind of made it a slow, easy rise and then fall. So our body spikes it. It's kind of like if you started a fire with like nice kindling as opposed to throwing gasoline on a fire, right? And so our blood sugar spikes. And then what happens is, since that food didn't have the minerals that we needed, our minerals are pulled from our tissues. They're pulled from our bones and from all of our tissues to deal with that. And so to give you an example of that, for every molecule of sugar or glucose that you eat, it requires 56 molecules of magnesium in order for you to metabolize that food. So you can see how it would deplete you of minerals every time you eat a refined carbohydrate or sugar, right? And then, so your body's dealing with that, your blood sugar's spiking and then it's crashing, and your body's desperately trying to pull minerals from its tissues in order to deal with the sugar and kind of pulling it from your hair and your skin, your bones, and making you look old, right? And then what happens to your nervous system is, who's ever seen a little kid on sugar? It's like a drug, right? It's like a drug. Now adults, we feel good for a little bit and then we crash. It has an effect on our nervous system, almost like a drug would. And by the time it gets down to your digestive tract, it affects your gut microbiome, the good bacteria that live there. It feeds the bad stuff like yeast or bad bacteria, and it prevents the good things from thriving. All of this, the effect of all of this is inflammation. And I didn't put this slide in here, and oftentimes I do. Americans are eating so much sugar, so many carbohydrates. And I think the stat now is that 1 in 3 people, 69% of the population, is either diabetic or pre-diabetic. This is because of all of the refined carbohydrates that we're eating. And what happens over time when you eat too many carbohydrates? And your body has to pump out insulin to push the glucose into the cell. Eventually it gets tired, right? Your pancreas gets tired and your cells get tired of having to deal with all that insulin on the cell, and it doesn't want to. So slowly the blood sugar levels start to rise. And I had a professor that used to call that crud in the blood. Then all the rest of your tissues have to deal with that, and your organs of detoxification and all of that. So this is the chronic inflammation that we're talking about, and this is the biggest thing that's going to cause aging. I was very lucky to be able to go out to Amish country a couple weeks ago, and I went out there and I adjusted like 35 Amish women. And they're so sweet and kind and wonderful. But one thing that I couldn't help but notice was that they aged faster than my mother, for example, was with me that day. She wanted to come out with me. And my mom is 70 years old. And I brought a woman back and I adjusted her. And I thought she looked like she was 85. And her daughter came in after her. And she said, "How old is your mother?" And I said, 70. I said, "Was that your mother?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, how old is your mom?" And she said, 60. Those people live hard lives. They eat lots of refined carbohydrates, believe it or not. They eat bread, potatoes, all of those things. They had a wood fire going the whole time. They were breathing in smoke. Their body had to deal with a lot of those toxins that caused chronic inflammation. There was a reason I was out there adjusting everybody, right? They're all in pain. So this is the biggest thing that we have to kind of get our heads wrapped around, is that refined carbohydrates are not only not good for you, they're bad for you. One of my favorite doctors said, your body is always either healing or dying. You pick your poison. And this is the poison. So this is what causes our cells to die and age: refined carbohydrates and sugar. Now, the main reason I put this slide on here is for us to talk about what the difference is between processed and refined foods and fresh and whole foods. So I like to don't even call that food. I like to call it non-food, because it's really not food. The stuff on your left are vegetables. And the really cool thing about vegetables is that they have everything already in them that you need to digest them. And so the way that your enzymes work in your body is when you eat something that already has enzymes, it has all the minerals that you need, all the enzymes to digest it, you don't have to use your body's own stores of enzymes. The stuff, the non-food on your right, doesn't have any enzymes in it at all. So when you eat that food, your body has to pull its own enzyme stores to digest it. And those enzyme stores have to be pulled from some other function in the body. So remember, we're just a bag of cells, right? And if our cells are malfunctioning, then we're going to malfunction. We're going to age. So here are your digestive enzymes, and I'm going to talk about the difference between digestive enzymes and metabolic enzymes here in a bit. But so when you eat a food, you have three main types of digestive enzymes: lipase, protease, and amylase. They digest fat, protein, carbohydrates, the three different types of macronutrients. And whole natural foods already contain them. What we're going to do tonight is I'm going to show all of you guys how to make sauerkraut, which is going to be awesome. And sauerkraut is full of enzymes. It's one of the best things that you can eat. Refined and processed foods require, since they don't have any digestive enzymes, they require us to pull our enzyme stores to digest them. We have to deal with those foods. And when we have to pull our metabolic enzymes away to digest those refined foods, we pull our enzymes away from doing things like, I don't know, thinking and breathing, and your liver function, the acid-base balance in your blood, your oxygen exchange. There's a reason why people who eat refined foods all day don't feel good. And you're going to age really, really quickly if you're taking the enzymes, the things that keep all cells functioning and moving, if you're taking those away from your body's function because you're eating refined and processed foods, you're going to start aging really quickly, right? And not only that, you're not going to be able to break down the foods well enough to pull the minerals and the nutrients from them, because remember, your body's always breaking down. It's constantly breaking down, constantly rebuilding. We have a whole new body every 7 years. And so we have to get those raw materials to rebuild our bodies from our food. And so we won't be digesting it if we're eating processed foods. So tonight we're going to talk mainly about this. And enzymes, I like to say, are the key to longevity. And I already said all life function of cells, and they're mediated by enzymes. But a doctor wrote, and I actually want to read it to you, Dr. Tim O'Shea, he's one of my heroes. He wrote, "A very clear chain of events connects enzyme depletion with the aging process. Undigested food clogs the digestive tract. The stuck food rots there and creates toxins and free radicals. Free radicals destroy cells, causing premature aging of tissues. Free radicals attack the cell membrane, causing them to shrivel up and dehydrate, subjecting the DNA to alteration from outside forces. Result, aging." And so the key to take away from this is that instead of eating these foods, this is my favorite slide, in part because I put it up and then everybody's always like, ooh, yummy. The key to take away from this is we have to eat food that's going to digest itself. And we have to learn how to eat like those primitive cultures did. So these are the things that are going to cause the inflammation and the aging. Sugar's already on there, we talked about that. High fructose corn syrup. If sugar is like throwing gasoline on a fire, high fructose corn syrup is like throwing jet fuel on a fire. MSG, things like MSGs are just poison, and no enzyme's going to do anything for that. Trans fats, I'm not going to get into that too much tonight, but trans fats, and maybe I should, trans fats are going to actually make your cells leaky. There's a reason they made them illegal, right? Your cell membrane has fats in it, and trans fats, like the things in margarine, soybean oil, canola oil, those actually get into your cell wall and they don't fit right, so your cell starts leaking and dehydrating, causing, again, inflammation, cell dehydration, free radical activity, and aging. These are just a few of my favorite doctors' quotes from them. Without enzymes, seeds would not sprout, fruit would not ripen, leaves would not change color, and you would not exist. Enzymes are the most important, and that was Dr. Weston Price. The next quote is from a guy named Dr. Royal Lee. He was also a pioneer in the field of nutrition. He started the company Standard Process way back in the 1920s, again, and he knew that you could not have isolated nutrition. And so when I talk through this, everybody's like, oh great, I'm going to start taking enzymes, right? I'm going to digest my food, my cells are going to work right, I'm just going to start taking enzymes. Well, he knew that you couldn't just do that. So he said, enzymes are the most important unit of the human body because every chemical change that takes place to repair tissue and assimilate food involves the activity of its enzymes. The reason Royal Lee was such a pioneer in the field of nutrition was because he advocated whole food nutrition, and he knew that if we just took enzymes by themselves, it would cause a problem. We need whole, real, natural foods, and that's why these primitive cultures were so successful. Enzymes don't work unless you have enough minerals. And so we can't all just go out and buy enzymes now. Now we have to think about how else we can get enzymes. And so minerals are cofactors for almost every reaction in the body. And where do we get our minerals from?
Vegetables, water,
Yeah, and where do the vegetables get the minerals from?
ground,
The soil, exactly. And does anybody think our topsoil might be a little bit depleted?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And so this is a reason to buy organic vegetables. And even organic vegetables aren't super high in minerals anymore. But we need our mineral cofactors in order for enzymes to break down food. And this is another reason, and we're going to talk about fermented foods again in just a second, this is another reason fermented foods are so important, because when you ferment vegetables that have minerals in them and you're breaking it down and the enzymes are going to work, it's going to be really digestible once it hits your body. So what I pictured on here is a product called The Gift. We carry this. This is basically a mineral. Has anybody heard of black water? Yeah? This is kind of what that is. They just take the soil and they run water through it, and what happens is it pulls the 74 plus trace minerals, but then it also gets macro and micronutrients and phytonutrients. And so I take this every single day because I realize that the soil is completely depleted. Minerals are so important to thrive and feel vital and feel good. Debbie, who knows Debbie, the woman who runs our store in here? She's wonderful. She told me a story about farmers in Afghanistan, and there happens to be this certain field that when actually they're shepherds, when their herd gets run down or depleted, or they have a really sick animal, if they can just get this animal to this field in Afghanistan, they know if they can get the animal to graze on the field, he'll get better. And what this field is it's fed by glacier runoff. And so it's extremely rich in minerals. And so this is something that we can't forget when we think about aging. We can't forget our minerals. And when I say minerals, most people think about calcium and magnesium, right? That's the only minerals they think about. Those are your macro minerals. But what I want you guys to think about are your trace minerals as well, because it's the trace minerals that tend to be the cofactors for the enzymes. Now these cofactors and the enzymes, they form what's called a complex. And nothing happens without that enzyme complex there to digest the food, break it down, and help you pull and absorb the minerals and the nutrients from the food.
Dr. Amanda?
Yeah.
How does the standard process trace minerals, because I do take those, compare with the liquid one? Are they similar products or
Not really.
no?
I really like standard process. I think they're great, but I like the fulvic and humic ones better. The fulvic, I'm saying fulvic and humic, they're more absorbable.
They're liquid?
They're liquid,
Okay.
and they're attached to fulvic and humic acid,
Okay.
which grab on to nutrients and transport them across the cell wall. So they're far more absorbable.
Okay.
And I find patients feel better and notice a bigger difference with that. So we talk about enzymes because we have to break down our food, and then we talk about minerals because enzymes can't work without minerals. Now, what we also have to realize is that we can't absorb minerals without fat-soluble vitamins. And I check a lot of vitamin Ds in my practice on almost every patient, and across the board, pretty much everyone's low in vitamin D. And the only people who aren't low in vitamin D are the ones that got put on that 50,000 IU once a week thing by their doctor. Yeah, which I don't really like the idea of that, because remember we talk about synthetic nutrients, and we have everything that we need from our food. We should be getting everything that we need from our food. So I have a picture of cod liver oil up here. And cod liver oil is especially, many of you probably took it when you were kids, or your grandmother made you take it. Cod liver oil is important because it has vitamin A and vitamin D in it. So it has the fat-soluble activators that are required for your cells to absorb minerals. These are also extremely important for your immune system and your hormonal system and all of those things. And what I'm talking about tonight are foundational things, and I think probably a lot of you wanted to come tonight and hear some magic bullets, right? Here's the thing that you can do in order for you to be young again, right? But if you follow the Weston A. Price diet and you follow foundational principles, you will feel younger and you will feel better. But it has to start with the gut. And that's why we talked about that first. So you have to be able to digest your food and absorb the nutrients and minerals from the food and not have left over a bunch of bad byproducts. They're going to cause free radical activities and destroy your cells. And then you have to have the right amount of minerals so that your body can rebuild itself, right? And you have to have the right amount of fat-soluble vitamins so that your hormonal system can repair itself. It's not until you do those foundational things that you feel young and feel good. So here are some action steps for you guys. One, for the love of God, stop eating refined carbohydrates. I beg my patients over and over again, yes?
But refined isn't like black beans or garbanzo beans or anything like that? Or
Yes,
is it?
exactly right, yeah. You know, for a lot of people who've been eating too many carbs for too long, they really need kind of a reset to their system where we remove all carbs for a period of time and allow their metabolism some time to heal. And at that point, we switch the way they're burning energy from sugar, which creates a lot of free radical activity in the body, to healthy fats, which are going to stabilize the blood sugar and help the metabolism to heal. It's always really interesting to me when we do this with people, because not only, number one, they lose weight, so that's good. Everybody needs to lose weight, right? Number two, I always see a change in their skin when they do this. I always see a change just in their general demeanor. And so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. Now, if you've had a really good diet for a long time and all that kind of thing, yeah, those kind of things are fine. And then we'll go back to that list that we had from Weston Price. Bread should be sprouted and things like that. So no refined foods at all. We want to do naturally fermented organic vegetables. And tonight we're going to teach all of you guys how to make sauerkraut. Who's made sauerkraut here before? Awesome. Well, maybe what you guys can teach me too, because if I do anything wrong, I have some people to tell me how to fix it. We're going to do naturally fermented organic vegetables that are going to naturally ferment in lactic acid yeast. and that's going to break down the indigestible parts of the vegetables and release the minerals and unlock the nutrition. And it's going to be really easy to digest, so then when we eat it, our body doesn't have to pull its metabolic enzymes away from other things in order to digest that food. It can keep those metabolic enzymes and make sure that those processes are working right. Whole food mineral supplement, and you can do something like standard process, trace mineral B12, or you could do something like fulvic and humic minerals. There's a lot of good ones out there, but the biggest thing to me is that it's from food, that it's not, you know, a mineral isolate or anything like that. You do a diet rich in fat-soluble vitamins, A, D, K2. Can anybody tell me where you get vitamin K2 from? What food?
Kale.
Kale, but it's a fat-soluble vitamin.
Purple cabbage.
It's a fat-soluble vitamin. So it's got to be in a fat, right?
Salmon.
Butter.
Real butter.
Real butter. From a cow that was outside in the sun getting vitamin D and eating the grass and getting all kinds of good minerals. Only that kind of butter. But that's the food that you get K2 from. Gouda cheese is also really high in K2. And what is K2? What does K2 do? Can anybody tell me?
Tells vitamin D where to plant itself.
That's right. It directs it towards the skeleton. So that's vitamin K2. Now, what food do we get vitamin D from?
Salmon.
Salmon. That's a good one. The liver. Any liver of an animal that's been out in the sun has the highest amount of vitamin D. Vitamin A is the liver too. And then something I didn't mention, I thought I put a slide in here, are gelatin-rich bone broths. Who in here makes bone broth?
I have.
Yeah. There's a reason we ask our patients to make bone broth, because when you make bone broth and you simmer those joints and the bones and the skin and all that, what we're doing is we're breaking down the collagen in those animals. And when we break down the collagen, we get a gelatin-rich bone broth, right? You put it in the fridge and it gels up. Well, collagen, I'm going to use collagen and gelatin interchangeably, but collagen is like the glue that holds our cells together. So we have to have healthy cells with everything else that we talked about, but then they got to get held together properly. And this is a big thing in bone density. When bones become brittle, it's often an issue with collagen. So collagen makes your skin supple, your hair strong, your nails nice and strong. It prevents wrinkles, it lubricates your joints, it actually heals your digestive tract. So if you're one of these people that have been eating too many refined carbohydrates for too long and have messed up your digestive tract, bone broth is a wonderful way to heal that, because it heals all the tissues in your body. And if you don't feel like making bone broth, you can go and get yourself some gelatin. We have it in the store, and you can put it in whatever food you want. But bone broth is better because, again, it's a real food, so it's going to contain minerals in it as well. So we like that the best.
How about the Pacific bone broth that you sell here?
Is that the one in the freezer or in the fridge?
No, it's the one in a carton.
I think the one in the freezer and the fridge are better. 'Cause those actually gel up when you put them in the fridge.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think that's a great substitute. We
Okay.
have them there because it's better than nothing. But yeah. So for any of you that want to learn how to make bone broth or want more information on bone broth, we have loaded onto YouTube. We have a whole speech that we gave all about bone broth. And then we also have a tutorial on YouTube on how to make bone broth. So we come back to the 11 principles of a healthy diet, and I only focused on a couple of these, but it was really a synergistic effect for these people that we talked about, these traditional people, to be strong, healthy, and virile. So again, we come back to no refined foods. Now, why do I have that they had some animal foods on here?
Because you need cholesterol.
Exactly. You have to have cholesterol, and you only get fat-soluble vitamins from animal fats. And so they had to have animal foods in their diet. Dr. Price didn't find any really healthy vegetarian primitive cultures. Nutrient density. So fermented foods are extremely nutrient dense because when you ferment a food, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in just a second, you add that lactic acid yeast culture, and what that's doing is it's getting at the food and it's breaking it down, and at the same time the bacteria that are breaking down the food are producing nutrients. And so eating a jar of sauerkraut is going to be far more nutrient dense than eating a cabbage that's raw. And so they fermented their foods, and that's one way they got nutrient density. The other way that they got nutrient density is they ate the parts of the animal that were really nutrient dense. They ate the organs. The organs are the most nutrient dense part of an animal. So if you don't eat liver, you should. I know. My mom never made me eat liver, so I was like one generation behind that. But they're extremely nutrient dense, and I think we have some chicken livers in the freezer over there. They eat some raw food, and this is because of the what? Enzymes. The enzymes in the raw food, very digestible. So they ate some raw food, and they did eat their fermented foods raw. It was every single culture fermented their foods, no matter where he was. If it was in, well, we all know about sauerkraut, but in Asia they make kimchi. Sauerkraut, kimchi. The one culture actually fermented their fish because they found out that if they gave fish to their dogs. It was in Alaska, the dogs that pulled the sleighs, or the whatever those things are called. And they found that if they gave fermented fish to those dogs, they could run further and faster. So they gave them fermented fish, and then they started eating it too. So all of these cultures fermented their foods because it made them more nutrient dense. They sprouted their seeds and grains in order to make them digestible. We all come back to this digestibility thing, right? The secret to aging is eating digestible food. So they sprouted those seeds and grains, which basically got the enzymes active in the seed, and the enzymes unlocked the nutrition in the seed, so the nutrients, the B vitamins, the minerals, and then once they sprouted it, then they ate it. So now it's digestible and the nutrition has been unlocked from that food. High in dietary fat, we already talked about that. Your body runs better off of fat than it does on sugar. The fat that they ate was an anti-inflammatory kind of fat, so it mitigated any inflammation, and they did not get degenerative diseases. Naturally mined salt, that's on there, that's high in minerals, naturally mined salt. Bone broths for the collagen and the healing powers of bone broth, and then provisions for future generations. And you know, we can do this now, and we're lucky that we have access to this stuff now. And for many people, when we talk, a lot of people out there are feeling bad. And this is from a woman who we put on that reset diet where we took her off sugar, put her on fat, and on traditional foods. We put her on broth and fermented foods, but we got her off of sugar. And she says, within a few days I woke up refreshed and ready to go with tons of energy. I actually saw improvements with my bouts of depression and mental clarity. I just feel so much better. I know that I have a long way to go, but I'm off to a great start. My husband noticed a difference in me and has even embraced these dietary changes. I can easily eat this way the rest of my life. So this woman stopped having to use all of her enzymes that control, that get everything going in all of her cells, stopped having to use those to digest her food. All of a sudden, she's got her metabolic enzymes to perform all the other functions that she needed in her body, and she started feeling better right away.